Okay, take it away.
All right, thanks so much. Yeah, so I'm here tonight to talk to you about how to run your favorite Python package inside of R. Before I get too deep into this talk, let me know if this inspires you to create anything. You can send me a message at Jessica Garson on Twitter. You can also tweet at me if you want as well. Just in case you want to take a look at the code that I'm going to be writing, or I know I saw earlier somebody was asking for a code sample. If you want to take a look at it, that could be found at github.com/twitterdev/run your favorite Python package in R. And you might be wondering, why would I ever want to run my favorite Python library inside of R? And so the reason why is that both languages are both very widely used for data science. So it makes sense that you might want to use them together. And the way that you do that is through a package called Reticulate. It allows you to run Python code inside of R. And the way that I like to think about this is it's a useful collaboration tool. So when I was first starting to really get going writing code and using Python was in the year 2013 and 2014. And I was working at an organization called the National Education Association. I lived in Washington, D.C. at the time. And I had a coworker that was also in a similar place to me. She was learning R and I was learning Python. And we never really collaborated. We just kind of were like, oh, we're doing similar tasks. We're doing some data pipeline stuff. We're doing some data cleaning, some data modeling. But we never really talked about the work that we were doing. And I really wish that we could have pair programmed together. And it would be really nice if there was this accessible tool for interoperability between languages that was available back then. So I see that this is a really exciting collaboration tool. And so that's something that's pretty exciting. There are really awesome packages in Python that are not available in R, and vice versa. Some of the plotting functionality inside of R is pretty great these days. There's ggplot, and there's some other stuff that's available. So it's kind of cool that you can actually these days just use the best of both worlds. And how I got started doing this was I'm very active as a developer advocate at Twitter on the Twitter developer forums. And every so often, people would write us about wanting to use our premium products. We have some premium API endpoints available, and people would want to use them inside of R, and they'd write to us, and we'd be like, well, we have a library called Search Tweets Python that you can use in Python, but we haven't built this in R. And people would be like, oh, well, that's cool, but I want to write R. And so I was at PyData in the fall in New York City, back when we used to be able to go places and go to conferences and stuff. But I guess this is a meetup, so I'm here, so that's cool. But yeah, so I was at PyData, and somebody was talking about Reticulate, and I was thinking at the time about writing my own version of Search Tweets Python, but calling it Search Tweets R. And then I was I heard somebody talk about Reticulate, and I was like, oh wow, I can just run the Python package inside of R. So I did that, and I wrote a blog post about it that I'll give you the link to. But tonight, I'm going to actually be using my favorite Python package, which is requests, to make an HTTP request and call the recent search endpoint. If you want to type into the chat what your favorite Python package is, I'd love to hear from you what your favorite Python package is. I really love APIs and endpoints and things like that. So yeah, my favorite Python package is requests. And so the recent search endpoint that I'm going to be using allows you to get tweets from the past 7 days. And you might be wondering, what do I need to get started if I want to start doing something similar? So you need to create an app, which will allow you to connect to the Twitter API. And you can apply for access at developer.twitter.com/en/apply for access. And you can also sign up for labs at t.co/labs. This endpoint is available through our Twitter Developer Labs initiative, which is our initiative to rebuild the Twitter API. And we are releasing previews of new endpoints that are available, and you can give us feedback on them. And this is one of those previews. And you can sign up for that at t.co/labs. And you will also need to enroll in the preview for recent search when you do that. And you actually have to go in and connect your app to the preview in order to be able to use it. And then also, you'll need an environment for running R on your machine. Today, I'll be using R Studio. So yeah, this is the live code portion of tonight's demo. So one of the things I love about the Python community is that y'all are so friendly and so awesome. So if you see something, let us know in chat. Since I'm going to be live coding, I will probably have at least one syntax error. It's just what happens. So yeah, if you see something, say something. So now we are inside of our studio. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to want to install all the requisite R packages that we're going to be using. So we're going to install Reticulate, which is the package that we'll be using to run our Python code inside of R. We can install dplyr, which lets us work with data in a more robust way. We can also install JSONlite, which will let us work with the JSON payload. We can install a YAML, which we're going to be using for reading in a configuration file. And then we have to call the packages. So this I like to think about as just your import statements up at the top of your Python file. So we're just going to be calling dplyr, JSONlite, and YAML. Cool. So now we have all of that set up. So from here, the first thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to want to set up a path for Python. So what we're going to want to do here is type in our path. And this is actually one of the first places that I made a mistake. I was trying to do Python 3, but you actually had to specify the .version number. And then from here, you want to tell Reticulate to use your Python path. So cool. So now we have that. And now from here, we're going to want to set up our virtual environment that we're going to be using. And so from here, I like to think about the step as like we're just going to be pip installing packages. So we want to do virtual env install, and then we want to do tweet env. And then we also want to install requests. And then we're gonna set that as equal to true. And then we're gonna do what all good developers do, which is cut and paste from their own code. And we're gonna, actually we don't need the slide. So what we're actually gonna do is we're actually just gonna say that we're gonna do virtual env. And then from here, what we're going to want to do is we're just going to say that we want to use the tweet env that we just created. And we want to call it, and we want to say that it's required is true. Awesome. So we have that. And now from here, now this is the point where we can actually start to import in what we're going to need to work with Python. So right now we're going to import in the Python JSON object. You might be wondering, hey, Jess, why are you importing in Python JSON? You have this JSONlite. So there is one part of this code where I was like, I don't know what to do. I really want a Python dictionary. And so the way that I typically make strings into Python dictionaries is to use JSON loads. And I was like, well, I'm already using Reticulate, so I can also use the Python JSON package to do that just as I would in Python. So that was really awesome. So we're going to use that. So we're going to import JSON. And then we're going to set R as equal to importing request. Cool. So now we have that ready to go. And now we can actually set in a line here, a variable called input. And then we can use readline, which is similar to the input function in Python. And I need to get power, so I'm going to do that really quickly. Yay for live demos. Cool. So now I have power. That's exciting. So now I can ask, this is very similar to like an import statement. So we could do, what handle do you want to get tweets from? And from here, let's do Twitter dev. That's our team's Twitter handle. So now the next thing that we can do here is we can also type in, set up our URL. So From here, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to use this printf function, and this lets you do string formatting. So for this, what you want to do is you want to do HTTPS : and then we're going to want to do api.twitter.com/labs/tweets/search. And then from here, we're going to want that. And then we want to actually set up a query. So we want it to be query equals, and we want it to be from, and this is going to be the handle that we're going to pass in. So we're going to do %s. And then from here, we want to pass that in as input, and that's a variable we just created. And then from here, let's print out the URL just to make sure that we got it right. I think that looks good. I think I spelled query right. I often do that wrong, so cool. And so from here, the next thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to want to load in our credentials. So from here, what we want to do is we want to set up a variable for cred. We could do YAML.load file. And then from here, we want to load in secret.yaml. I have inside the GitHub repository, there's actually a sample of what that would look like. So if you're like, oh, what is she loading in? That's it. And so from here, we actually want to pass in the bearer token. So we want to do that. And then one of the interesting things about R is that you have to actually use $signs instead of brackets to slice things. So yeah, from here, cool. And so now we've loaded in our bearer token. And so from here, the next thing that we want to do is we want to create a header. So we can use the printf again. And then you're going to want to set up the authentication as bearer. And we actually want this outside there. And then from here, we're going to want to do bearer. And then we want the %s again. And then from here, since this is a dictionary, we're going to have basically like a string version of this dictionary. Oh, and I forgot to pass in the printfs or the bearer token. So yay for errors. Cool. Awesome. Now we have that. And so from here, the next thing that we want to do is we want to turn this into a dictionary. So this is one of the things that I actually struggled with when I was first writing this code. Is I was like, what am I going to do with this, like, dictionary? Because I really want it to be a dictionary. So I decided to use JSON loads. If anybody has any other ideas about like how they would solve this as well, let me know. It was something I was struggling with. So, but found a solution that worked. So cool. Now we have this. We have our header dictionary. So now we actually are set to kind of make our request. So what we could do is we can create a variable called response. And then from here, let's do arm and then request. And then the first thing that we want to do is we want to make a GET request. And then we want to pass in the URL. And then we want headers to equal the header dict. Cool. Awesome. So now let's print out the response. This is like the most nerve-wracking part of the live demo. This is like where we're going to figure out if this worked or not. Yes, it worked. OK, cool. So we have a JSON response. And we have a tweet about tonight's event. And we have a bunch of tweets and some other things like that. And so now let's actually pass this into a data frame just so it's a little bit easier to work with. So we can do JSON data. And then from here, we could do from JSON, pass in the response text. And then what we're going to want to do is we're actually going to want to flatten this. And what that does is it basically allows, so if you notice here, there's actually two nested dictionaries inside of this JSON object. There's data and there's meta. And so this flattens both of them into one. So if we do flatten equals true, then we get 1. And then let's actually pipe this into a data frame. So let's do, and this is using the dplyr package that we imported as data.frame. And so from here, now we could view this JSON data. Cool. And you can actually see what's coming from the meta and what's coming from data, which is pretty exciting. We have like the tweet IDs, and we have the newest and the oldest. So for the newest one, that's the one about tonight's event. And then we have the oldest one down here, and that's about tweet annotations, which are pretty exciting. Cool. So now let's say we wanted this to be a smaller data frame. From here, we can select, and this again is using dplyr JSON data. That's the variable that we created for the data frame. And then from here, we could say that we want data.id in there and data.text. And now we can view the smaller df. And so now we have a data frame of just data.id and data.text. So yeah, cool. And so that is the live demo. If you want to see a blog post on a similar topic, that's t.co/Python package R. I also wrote a blog post when I was first getting started with R and the Twitter API that actually walks you through Hello World if you were like a little bit, if that was a little too advanced or you just want to like dig deeper in. It's t.co/getting started R Twitter. And also, if you're building with the Twitter API and there's features that you want to see, if you're like, oh, I really wish that like, you know, there was more OAuth 2.0 support or something like that, you can give us feedback on the features that you'd like to see at twitterdevfeedback.uservoice.com. And if you're building with the Twitter API, I'd love to have a conversation with you and get to know you. And let me know if this inspires you to create anything. My Twitter handle, again, is @JessicaGarson. My DMs are open, so feel free to send me a DM. Also, you can let us know at TwitterDev if you built anything inspired by today's talk, or on the Twitter community forums. As I mentioned, I'm quite active there. Thanks again.
Thank you very much for that talk. That was really awesome. So I have a quick question for you. How do you kind of translate the Python syntax to R when you're doing that? Like it seemed like you needed to use a little, you know, you had to use the $ instead of the dot. Is there like a specific method to how you think about that?
Yeah, it was actually like, I actually really struggled with that. I was like trying to do dots at first, and then I was like, and then I just like read a bunch of other R code, and I was like, oh, let me try it using it like the way that you would do it in R. There was like one thing that was like super weird at one point, which was at some point there was like this like weird object that was kind of stuck in this like no man's land between like, it wasn't R and it wasn't the Python object. It was like in the middle, and I had to like, the only way that I could get it out was to like put it into a pandas data frame, and then I could get it into like, I could just slice that out and get it into my code. So there are some like awkward things that do happen, but yeah.
That's cool. So have you found any limitations in terms of what Python modules you can use with it, or do you think it would work with anything pretty much? Or
everything I've tried to work with has worked pretty well. I haven't had an issue yet, but that doesn't mean that there won't be. If you do hit anything, let me know, because I would like to know before I try to do something, and then I just can't. So most of the stuff I've done has been in like the data science world, though. So
like what kind of specifics? I mean, that was a good demo. How have you used it kind of in your day-to-day?
So as I've been learning R more, sometimes I'm just like, I really wish there was this Python package I wanted to use, just because like I come from Python. So I've just mostly used it to like be like, oh yeah, that's awesome, I can do that. So yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you very much for. I don't see any questions in the chat right now, but is there any call to action you want to make before we close out?
Thanks so much for having me. I hope to visit y'all IRL sometime.
Yeah, thank you very much for speaking. I really enjoyed the talk, and live coding too is always.
Yeah, thanks to the person who was like praying to the live coding gods. I was a little bit nervous, but it worked out. So
yeah. Well, thanks again.